right, welcome back to another episode of Recovery Real Talk. My name is Angelica Matias Rodriguez, and go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Angel Sivori. I am the executive director uh, for Thrive.
All right, you want to tell me a little bit about what Thrive is and what exactly it is you do and what your role in Thrive is? Like
Yeah,
what your role entails?
yeah, totally. So, Thrive is a nonprofit that was started with the mission to help break the cycle of homelessness. Uh, we are a, group of uh, resident services coordinators and case managers who work on site at permanent supportive housing buildings and low income housing, affordable housing families. We work with seniors and vets as well as uh, individuals who are struggling with substance abuse and mental health. And we provide connections to different resources. We give them a space to speak, to talk, to feel heard. We help them with job hunting. We help them build community engagement and make sure that their food insecurities are addressed, that they're connected to doctors, special uh, other resources that they may need, and build community engagement within the properties. And my role as the executive director and the founder, we started up in October of last year, and I oversee our six amazing resident service coordinators and case managers, and go onto the properties as well and provide classes and different uh, activities within the community.
Nice. So you're more in the technically Northern California region is where most of your locations are, right? Not I
Yes.
know that Humboldt's considered Northern California, but I'm talking more like Sonoma County and Alameda
So
County.
we are in Mendocino County, Sonoma County. We're all the way down in Bakersfield. We're in Gilroy, uh, and I think that's it. Oh, and Lake County as well.
Oh, nice. I didn't know you guys were out there.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So tell me a little bit about your background. How did you get from whatever you were doing before to figuring out, you said you were the founder, correct?
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
being getting to where you were to like where you are now. How did that happen? Where are you from? Like what sparked your interest?
So I grew up with a pretty wild childhood and a lot of family history of mental health and those sort of things. And uh, I knew that I always, because of the stuff that I went through as a kid, I wanted to work. Uh, my main goal was to work as a victim witness advocate. I wanted to work with individuals who had been victims of crimes, and I wanted to go through the court process. I wanted to be an attorney. I wanted to do all of like that world. And so I started going to school and worked on my bachelor's in criminal justice, focused in human services. And while I was doing that, I was taking classes on substance abuse and psychology and sociology. And I started working in the world of victim witness. I worked as a teen parent advocate and then also as a advocate for victims of sexual assault. And through that, I realized that's not what I wanted to do. I it was really defeating, and I didn't want to deal with the court process anymore. I wanted to help them be able to get out of their situations. I wanted to do more than just deal with the big incident. I wanted to help them past that. I wanted them to help build their lives and do more and um, see how their life could be after after the trauma, after all of those things. And so what ended up happening was I started working for another agency providing social services, and the social services were on uh, low income, affordable housing properties, and I was working with the residents and um, individuals who were formerly homeless, newly housed, super excited, full of hope and everything, and then I would watch them be put into these four walls, and in those four walls, they didn't know how to live. They didn't know how to even be comfortable. We had individuals who, they had a full apartment, but they were still going outside and sleeping outside because that's what they were comfortable with. And they still hadn't gotten the things that were addressed that led them to be homeless, like their mental health or their substance abuse. They didn't get to address the trauma or any of those things. So now they're just in four walls where the noises and the voices are just so much louder. And I was working with these other agencies, and the policies and things like that. There were so many things that got in the way from being able to do what I believed was enough for these individuals, enough service and enough support. And there was such a barrier to providing them with my vision of what would help them. Or they would tell me, this is what I need. They knew what they needed, and it was out of my control. And it just was so frustrating to me because I wanted to do more. And so as I was working with different property management companies, they continued to express the same thing that they're like, I can see the need. I can see that we're providing these great buildings and these things for these individuals, but now what? They're still going back into homelessness because they haven't addressed their substance use. They haven't got their mental health. They haven't seen a real doctor. They, have all these surgeries that they need and different medical treatments they need, but they can't have because they weren't in a stable housing situation where they could recover and where they had a support system. And so through that, I continued to work with the management companies and um, and kind of visualize what it would be to have a company that didn't have those sort of barriers that were connected to the people that they were serving in a deeper level. And so that's kind of where Thrive was born. Was I wanted to make sure that everybody that gets housed into these affordable housing situations or these permanent supportive housing buildings have a real shot to stay there, not just go back to the way things were. And, it's corny, but to thrive.
No, I totally get it. I feel like and it's not that there's a lack of resources. I just feel like no, actually, there probably is a lack of resources, actually. But more than that is, I totally get the frustration because it's like, we could do this, this, and this, but we don't have what it is. We can't do that, or there's this and that. And I've run into those situations, and it's definitely frustrating because I'm kind of like that too, where of course, I want everyone to succeed, but it's almost to a sense where sometimes, because there's a lack of resources, people are kind of set up for failure when they get housed because there's a lack of mental health resources, or there's a lack in even getting medical care. Like, I moved back home 4 years ago, and I just got a primary care provider, like,
Yeah.
less than a year ago, maybe 6 months ago. And if it's hard for me to find health care, I can't imagine how hard it is for someone that was living, on the streets for X amount of time trying to get health care, especially if they don't even know how. I mean, I didn't even really know how. I was just like calling places and was like, "Are you accepting new patients?" So
Yeah.
it's
And
like
navigating everything and not
paperwork.
feeling defeated when you're you call and they're like, no. And then you call another one and they say no. And, you know, to feel defeated and be like, well, I guess, I'm screwed, And, so being able to sit there and help them through and be like, hey, let's call together. And, this is a no, but these are the right questions to ask. Here's how
Uh-oh.
those
Uh,
pieces, right? Again?
I can hear you now. Yeah, it cut out for a
Oh,
second.
okay. I got a phone call. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, okay, cool. But yeah, helping them to be able to navigate through paperwork and help them to work through, uh, you know, who you call and what are the questions that you ask, and and sometimes it helps to just have somebody, calling on their behalf that sounds official, uh,
Yeah.
you know, sometimes, I can have a resident call and be like, I need an appointment. And they're like, oh, we're all booked. And then, I'll call and be like, hey, uh, I'm here. I'm calling. I'm a, director with Thrive, and I'm calling on behalf of my client, who needs some support and is struggling with these barriers, and we need to get them an appointment as soon as possible. They're like, well, let's see if we can get something straightened out. So sometimes it
Yeah.
just takes a different, some support. And yeah,
Yeah, and then, like, I know paperwork can be kind of intimidating too, and it's always a ton of paperwork to get anything done anywhere, not even just at a doctor's, but to get food stamps and to get is it Medicaid or Medi-Cal?
Yeah, Medi-Cal and
Okay.
partnership and,
A lot of
food stamps.
paperwork, a
It's
lot
a
of
lot of
phone
paperwork.
calls.
And
Yeah.
questions that can be really traumatizing and triggering,
Mhm.
to somebody who's struggling with mental health and hasn't dealt with the trauma that they've faced so far. Um, you know, Filling out paperwork and helping them to understand that when there's questions on there, like if you use drugs recreationally or any of those
Mhm.
things, like how important it is that they answer those questions truthfully,
Yes.
you know, so that they can get the proper help that they need. And explaining to them it's not to get them busted or get
Yeah, they
caught
always
up
think
with,
there's, like, a consequence, and I'm like, "You're not in trouble."
we're trying to help you,
Yeah.
and
You have to be honest if you want me to help you.
yeah. And so, having Thrive, you know, the dream I had for Thrive, really centered around building relationships with individuals, building trust with individuals, showing up when we say we're going to be there, and really just showing them that we care. And and then the big thing is making sure that the policies that and the classes and all of the pieces that go into being a social services agency, uh, are connected with the people. So, I'm not up in an ivory tower deciding what we're going to teach. I have been on the properties. I'm working with my resident service coordinators and I'm asking them, hey, you who is there every day working with these individuals, what is relevant to them this month? What do they need to learn? What are they struggling with? Because we have seniors who, you know, don't want to and don't need to learn how to do their laundry or balance a checkbook, but they sure would like, some, yoga or something to help with their flexibility, like a beginner's yoga class, or they would like to have a grief class, because a lot of their friends are passing away, you know, versus an affordable housing property with a lot of families who are, trying to navigate childcare and different things like that, versus a permanent supportive housing who's um, those individuals are newly housed and chronically homeless and struggling with mental health, and the focus is mental health and basic living things like how to do laundry and some simple things like how to cook a meal, those sort of things, which wouldn't be relevant to a mom who's been cooking kid foods for her kids for several years.
Mhm. Yeah, I understand that. Did you have, like, a not like an aha moment, but, like, a last straw where you were like, "Alright, I'm doing this," when you started the nonprofit? Like, was there, like, something that just, like, where you were like, "That's it, I'm done. I'm starting
um
my own nonprofit."
yeah, actually, there was a couple of them that led up to it, but I think the big one for me was being told that I couldn't go into a residence unit, being told that, uh, I needed to meet with them, like, in my office and not go into the unit itself, which is really frustrating because working with individuals, um, you're building trust, and being in an office is intimidating, and the biggest thing that I like to teach my team is that you've got to meet these individuals where they're at. And sometimes that means going into their unit. And also, just because I've built some trust with them doesn't mean that they're entirely honest. And I can tell a lot by how somebody needs to be supported by going into their home. I can see that have hoarding issues. I can see that there's a food insecurity that they're not willing to admit to, because I've gone in their home and I can see that the cupboards are empty and, you know, those sort of things, or that they're struggling to be able to do the things they used to be able to do with cleaning up their home. And so maybe I need to connect them with an IHSS worker, but they're too proud to admit that. So being told that I couldn't go into a residence unit just blew my mind.
Yeah, and that's probably where they feel the most comfortable because an office can be intimidating, and I've even I think that appearance also matters too when it comes to that. Like, I would always get in not in trouble, but I'd be like, "Hey, you can't wear a hoodie at work," or "You can't, do this." But I was talking to a different support staff agency, and they were like, "Actually, we encourage that because if you come in the business attire, they feel intimidated and almost threatened in a sense, because 'cause they're like,
Hmm.
"Oh, like, if this person needs to talk to me, then I'm in trouble." So I try to be as best business casual as I can, but I also think that, yeah, you should be able to go talk to a resident in their unit. That's their home, and that's where they feel the most comfortable, and they're probably more likely to open up to you and feel safer in their unit, especially when it comes to mental health where they think like, "Oh, you got your cameras in here," or "There's a
Hmm.
hidden microphones," or, especially with people that have those mental health issues where they have that paranoia. So,
Hmm.
they feel safer and more at peace in their home, especially if you need to have a difficult conversation with them, at least they're in the comfort of their home getting some kind of bad news, rather than in an
Yeah,
office setting that's already probably stressing them out in general.
absolutely. And like you said with the clothing thing, all of our staff, except I'm wearing a t-shirt right now, you know, we we all our staff we wear jeans and a t-shirt or, a hoodie. We cater to our residents. We are not better than them. We're not wearing blazers. We're not, representing ourselves as these scary social workers. We are a community member. We're one of them, and we're not better or anything. We just meet them where they are, and that includes how we dress. We love our Thrive logo, but the Thrive logo is not on fancy Gucci clothes. We're wearing t-shirts and hoodies because you know we want everybody to feel comfortable and like they can talk to us.
Nice. How many other agencies did you work for prior to building Thrive?
For
Oh, wow. Strictly in Sonoma County or all over California, or where did you start?
uh,
Not like
uh,
you don't have to say the names of the agencies, but like just like
oh no, I won't.
area. Yeah, I meant more like
Yeah,
areas.
yeah, just yeah, in Northern California, I did a little bit of work up in Humboldt County, and then also in Sonoma and Lake County.
Oh, okay. So Northern California, definitely.
Mhm.
And then you started Thrive. Thrive was built out of Sonoma County, correct?
Yes,
Nice.
yes. Our first property was in Santa
Oh, nice. So why Thrive? Like, how did you come up with Thrive?
Rosa.
The name.
So creating the name was so difficult because there was so many different ideas, and the struggle was coming up with something that really encompasses our mission. And you know there was all sorts of different things that played around with the idea of like fierce because you want to like fiercely advocate and like just different things. But ultimately we came on Thrive because uh really it was the, the idea is to not just put them in four walls, but to help them thrive, right? It's
Right.
easy correlation, but it also is an acronym, which stands for teach and humanity, resiliency, inspire, vision, and education, which each of those is what we strive to do, or teaching them. We want to make sure that they have a sense of humanity and they're always treated with dignity. It doesn't matter where they came from, what they've been through, you know, where they started, they're here now. And this is this is our community. We want to teach them to be resilient, and we want to inspire and get them to inspire. One of the biggest things that Thrive does that I think is different than a lot of social services is we motivate the residents to put on their own classes. So we have resident led classes and support groups and peer support, which is super super huge. Our first one was an individual who was always painting alone in his apartment, and he'd always bring down different things that he had painted, and he was really proud of it, but he really lacked that like drive to come out of his unit and build relationships with the people that were in his community. And so we had talked to him. We're like, gosh, I think that everybody would really love to paint, and so why don't you do a painting class? He's like, well, I don't know how to teach. I'm like, sure you do. Just you come out here every day and you show me what you've painted and tell me how you did it. And that's what teaching is, right? And so he's like, all right. So now he teaches the painting class every single week to the residents. They all come down and
How
they paint together.
cute.
Yeah. And then all of these individuals, they have so many different cool talents and
They
hobbies and
do.
dreams. And you just have to give them an outlet for it and they'll share it with everybody. And so we inspire them to inspire others. That's really important to us, to have the vision to see what they can do and what their future looks like, not just like where they're at, but like what their goals are and everything. We always talk about SMART goals you know, that they're measurable and attainable, and if they're setting times to meet goals and set through what they're doing, those sort of things are really important. And then obviously education, having those classes, and whether it's budgeting or something as simple as like how to do laundry. I was never taught how to do laundry. you know a lot of kids have never been taught how to do laundry. I just taught my son how to pump gas because I remember the first time I tried to put gas on, I'm like, what am I doing? Like,
Yeah.
you know, we don't think about all of these things. And a lot of these individuals who are in, these situations haven't been taught the basics, you know, and, teaching them and giving them a space where like they can see they're not the only ones and they don't need to be ashamed of not knowing how to do it. Like, and giving them that love to want to learn and share what they know is so incredible. So
Yeah, that's
we're
awesome.
correct.
I remember one time I was like, "We should do more art activities," and, like I said, lack of resources, so I went to Michael's and I bought paint and brushes and another, one of the caseworkers brought some brushes she had from home and stuff, and, um, we had a rock painting day, in the lobby 'cause I think it was, like, raining outside, we couldn't do it outside, and there were so many, we have so many talented artists at my facility. Actually, I don't wanna call it a facility, my property.
Yeah,
But we have tons of, really talented art. I've had tenants make me things like dream catchers, and I hang them up in my office. And I've had
absolutely.
two residents give me, dream catchers. One of, my residents passed away, but I have his dream catcher hanging in my office that he made me when he very first moved in, and he used to love doing, woodwork, kinda art and, carvings and stuff. He was awesome. And then I have another individual that made me a dream catcher too, and I told them, I was like, "You should, make a booth at, Arts Alive or something," or they make wind chimes out of, driftwood.
Yeah.
That soft wood that pulls up on the beach because 'cause it's been, going through sand and stuff,
Mhm.
and she was like, I don't know," and I was like, "You should totally do it, dude." I was like, "These are awesome." I would buy one if I can't because I'm obviously the property manager, I can't, give people money, but I was like, "I would buy one if I saw one at Arts Alive or something." I was like, "We're at the plaza during farmer's market," something. I try to encourage them, because I mean, they just need that push, because they don't think they don't think they think it's just, like, for fun, or they just
It's
think
a
nobody
hobby.
would care, or yeah, or it's just a hobby, and they don't really think that it'd be anything more than that, and I'm like, "No, this is
Mhm.
this is badass, like, you should keep doing this, this is awesome." So I definitely feel you when you got that resident to come out and teach painting. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's incredible. They are so talented, and, you just gotta, foster that and let them know they are. They're so talented.
Yeah, definitely that boost of confidence will go a long way, especially when it comes to building that rapport with them too. Like, you're not just doing it for the rapport, but you're also doing it because you're being a genuine person. And I feel like it takes really genuine individuals to work at properties, or even like sober facilities, even like rehabs and stuff. You got to be a genuine person, because there's some people that probably do it for the paycheck, and that's fine too. I'm not saying it's not a good thing or anything. I mean, you are who you are at work and you are in your personal life. But I definitely think
Sure.
being genuine is a giant and empathetic and compassionate contributor to properties like these.
Absolutely. And just being committed to the growth. There's a lot of defeat in this type of work, and because the truth is you can't want it for them, and sometimes they're not ready for it. Like I had spoke about that gentleman earlier, that he had a great apartment, a brand new apartment, and the place he was comfortable was sleeping outside because he had been homeless for 3 decades. And in order for them to succeed in these programs, they have to want it themselves, and they have to be ready. And you have to be able to accept that sometimes, even though you're giving them all the resources and the answers, it's it's just not their time. It's not. And so it's really defeating. But when you get to see somebody like click, like an aha moment or something where they really find a passion, or you know, they see something that makes them want to get up in the morning. We have residents that were super negative and super, like, didn't even want to be here, who
Yeah.
are out here helping each other and volunteering, with food bank, and, you know, and go around and pull weeds and pick up trash and do different things. And they wake up every morning and they're like, "Hey, Angel." And they're super happy every morning, which is like night and day to when I come to these properties and they're like, you know, well, somebody was screaming all last night and complaining about all of these different things, and they're so negative. It's a
Uh-huh.
totally different vibe. And that's all because of a sense of community that's built, and the inspiring individuals to have passion and care for where they live.
Yeah, I agree. I was actually just telling someone, I was like, so I think it was one of your employees, and I was telling her, I was like, it's so funny how they all like get on each other's nerves and they talk shit about each other, but when they actually, like, something happens or someone needs something and they come together as a community and actually help each other, it's actually a really beautiful thing. Like, I like to see it. I'm like,
Absolutely.
"Oh, but they were bugging you last week, a few days ago," but it's just it's just like it's almost like having, like, that annoying sibling. Like,
Hmm.
oh, like, leave me alone, but also if you need something, I
I'd
got
die for
you.
you, but
Yeah.
also, like, in small doses, my friend.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So, I know we've been talking about, permanent supportive housing a little bit during this podcast so far, and I feel like permanent supportive housing is so new, and I think it's only really in California right now, and I could be wrong, but it's mainly coming from the facilities I've seen and looked up in other agencies is it's mainly in all over California, and I feel like a lot of people don't really know about what it is, what the purpose of it is, and I know it can be kinda controversial because people are like, "My tax dollars." So it's
Yeah. Yeah.
they don't understand, it's just that lack of education on why permanent supportive housing is a thing and what the purpose of permanent supportive housing is, and that we're still trying to navigate it as a whole. I think as a whole state, in a sense, like, I think everybody's just kind of figuring out what works for them, what's not working, what's working. It's kind of like a trial and error. So do you wanna talk about what permanent supportive housing is and what the purpose of it is?
Yeah, absolutely. So, permanent supportive housing comes from the concept of housing first. It's a concept where you have all these individuals who are struggling uh, to, you know, um, it's corny, but thrive. um, you have these individuals that, have all these different barriers. And if you look at, Maslow's theory, which is a hierarchy of needs, it's a pyramid basic concept is, the bottom, you've got to meet each level of the pyramid in order to be able to reach fulfillment with your life, right? And so the bottom is basic needs of food, shelter, water, you know, those sort of basic needs in order to survive. And part of that is shelter. And so the belief behind housing first is we're not considering your background. Uh we're not saying, oh, because you have a criminal history or you can't stay sober yet or those sort of things, you don't deserve housing. They're saying housing is a fundamental right as a human being. We're going to house you. And once we've housed you and you're sheltered and you've got those basic needs met, then we can work on the other pieces. And so with housing first, permanent supportive housing, because you're housing individuals who don't check all of the boxes of a normal uh, resident. They don't have a $600, not dollar, a 600 credit score. They don't have a clean background. They don't have a steady job yet. Those sort of things don't exist yet because they're still trying to meet those basic needs. With permanent supportive housing, we look at individuals who are chronically homeless, the individuals that have been homeless for more than a year or who continuously re-enter into homelessness. And and a lot of times, and they're kind of getting away from the assessment, and creating something new. But right now, that assessment is called the VI Spit app, and the VI Spit app is an assessment that they do with individuals who are chronically homeless that essentially determines how likely they are to die in the next year. And that is based off of their different risk factors. If they have sex for money, if they're using intravenous drugs, if they have diabetes, if they aren't seeing a regular doctor, all of these pieces, you know, uh, are measured and based off of how high you score on this assessment is where you get bumped up onto the top of the list. And then they do a system called coordinated entry. And so when a permanent supportive housing building opens up or they get an opening because they've been open, then they meet on these meetings, coordinated entry meetings, and they go to the list and everybody that is chronically homeless and meets these high risk factors, they're higher acuity, higher need, they're the next person to be referred into the housing. So the goal with that and the purpose of that is that if we house these individuals, housing first, we put them into housing, then they're more likely to live past that year, that they're able to uh, get past feeling like there's no way to move forward with being clean because, who wants to be stone cold sober on the side of the highway with nothing, you know?
Yeah.
If we house them, then we can talk about going to the doctor and getting your diabetes under control. If you're housed, now you can get that surgery that you haven't been able to get because there's not a stable support system for you. You're housed now, so now you can look for work because you can shower and you can get a good night's rest and show up for your job and do the things that you need to do. So now you can fix your credit score and get more income and be able to pay into the taxes everybody's so upset about.
Yeah.
Um, you can't. The theory is that they can't build a life until we start at the very basics of giving them a place to live, to shower, to sleep, to eat, to go to the bathroom. Uh, and so with that, we have these permanent supportive housing buildings, which is ultimately, like I said, the motivation for Thrive is it's not enough to just put them in housing because then they're in housing and they're like, Well, now what?
Mhm.
Okay, well, now let's help you navigate how to get to a doctor. Let's help you um, get food in that house. Let's get you hygiene materials so that and teach you basic skills so that you know how to exist in those four walls and just sit in there in silence and be like, well, now what?
Right, and silence is loud.
Silence is so loud.
Silence is so loud because they're so used to having to sleep with one eye open, making sure no one steals their stuff, or they get beat up, or they're living by a train and they hear the train go by and now they're not hearing that anymore and they're not having it's a huge adjustment. I think that people have a hard time understanding is that they're like people that get not upset, but they're like, "Oh, so and so locked themselves out 7 times, but it's a newer move-in." And I'm like, "Well, you have to understand that they're not used to carrying around a set of keys because they're
Right.
not used to being housed." And
Mhm.
I remember at the very beginning, a caseworker told me that because I was like, I'm trying to like help this individual. Like, I've given them lanyards and stuff, and they're like, yeah, they're just having a really hard time adjusting to being housed. And I was trying to ask, like, what else should I do? What else can we do? And they were like, because I mean, it's not like that's a huge deal, like losing your keys and stuff, but it can be frustrating. And
Oh, for sure.
yeah, it can be frustrating. I know there's tons of other things I am frustrated about, but like the keys thing is one that like seems to be like an ongoing thing for me. And I'm like, oh, like here's a lanyard. Don't take it off, okay? But it's bound to happen again. And it's not just like it's other little things too, like that they're just not used to. Like having a bed. I have
And
in the past had an individual that preferred to sleep on the floor. Didn't want his bed.
absolutely. And, part of the teaching too isn't just the basic skills, it's also teaching consequences. So Thrive works hand in hand with property management. And, so as much as like for some people it seems like not a big deal that they lock themselves out, we still have to teach them that there's consequences to that. So,
Mhm.
as much as we love the compassion and care of managers like yourself who are like, okay, they're like still getting adjusted to it. We also like to work with management and teach them consequences, right? So, okay, this is the seventh time you've locked yourself out. So, now there's going to be a consequence. You're going to have a lease violation. And in order for you to get back in, we're going to go get you a $5 money order and you're going to have to pay to get back in because that's a consequence.
Yep.
And, you know, so as much as, I love that you're talking about compassion and it's so hard to find managers sometimes that have that compassion and can take the time, especially because like you said, it's a new concept. Permanent supportive housing is a new concept and a lot of these managers don't they understand fair market, they
Yep.
understand renting to a regular, but this isn't the same. Uh but so the compassion is really important and very wonderful that you have that, but also there's so much value in, Thrive and management working together and saying, hey, like I need you to write him a lease violation so that I can sit down and talk to him and be like, look, this is a consequence that you have
Mhm.
because of these actions. So we really got to, you know, the answer isn't that we're always going to have Angelica let you back in. The answer is that we're going to work on ways to help you remember. So maybe that's that we hang your and making it resident led. We always encourage the residents to come up with ideas of what is going to help you remember. So maybe they're not going to wear a lanyard all the time because they have trauma and they don't want it sitting on their neck,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Cool, cool, cool. But Tim said that it worked for him that he hangs the lanyard on his doorknob when he comes in the unit so he can't leave without touching it. And it's like, oh, I gotta take it with me.
Mhm.
And it's his idea, it's his buy-in. What he knows is going to work for him. And when we encourage those sort of things, then I'm gonna say it again, they thrive.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. Yeah, definitely holding them accountable, like residents accountable on their behavior is huge because yeah, I can be really nice and empathetic and compassionate, but I'm also going to tell you when you're doing something wrong. I'm not always going to be this sunshine, butterfly and rainbows person. I'm like, "Hey man, you can't yell at people like that. You can't talk to people like that. It's not okay. So this is the consequence and this is why. Because you have to teach them that. I mean, I understand wanting to feel heard and wanting your feelings to be validated, but there are other ways to express those and they just don't know. That's the whole
Hmm.
point is to help them thrive. So so
Yeah,
yeah, I totally
exactly.
get the part about holding people accountable. And even like with case management, they'll be like, "You're gonna serve a notice, right?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah. Yeah, they need to know what they did was not okay and why it wasn't okay." So when they come down, I always let them know, like, "Hey, I'm serving so and so a notice. So just a heads up, they might come down and be really escalated. Just a heads up." And so this is what it says. I give a copy and I'm like, "This is what happened." And I give them, and they're like, "Okay, yeah, definitely. We'll talk to them if they come and talk to us." Or sometimes they want to talk directly to me and I'll be like, "Yeah, I could totally tell you why you got that notice. And we can sit down and talk about it with case management if you'd like. Do you think you need some support?" And they'll be like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "Okay, well, let's go." So then we go and we talk about it. And then they're like, "Okay, I won't do it again." And most of the time they actually don't. Or they'll go a really long period of time of not doing it. And then they'll do it again. And I'll be like, "Hey, we talked about this. Remember? Do you remember what we talked about?" So it's like definitely holding them accountable is what also helps with keeping them housed because then they can thrive and move on
Yeah.
to not being in permanent supportive housing and maybe living in an affordable facility or just market wherever. It'll help them
Mhm.
how to have tenant resident interaction.
Absolutely. And be able to work and live in a community, which, is hard for anybody, you know, having neighbors,
Yeah,
we have, perfectly well, stable individuals who can't seem to be a good neighbor. So it's a skill that everybody needs to learn and
definitely. Like the whole being a good neighbor thing, like when it comes to music. But it's
Mhm.
1 o'clock in the afternoon. It's like, yeah, but it's not fair to your neighbor. And it's not being a good neighbor that you're blaring your music at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, though, even if it's not quiet hours, that the walls are shaking. And you have
Yeah,
to and I'll be like, that's not being a good neighbor. I know it's not technically a lease. Well, you're disturbing the peace. So technically, yeah, it is a lease violation, but it's also getting them to understand the part about what being a good neighbor is
for sure.
and making it comfortable for everybody.
And if the shoe was on the other foot, would you enjoy that?
Exactly.
No, probably not. So, you know, that's so huge.
Yeah. So do you think that the community has a play in people's recovery and stability?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, the common phrase that eh, most people know is the devil uses idle hands, you know, and so um, sitting alone, having nothing to do, having no schedule, having your first of all, it's so easy to just fall into recovery and just go do what you're used to. So having activities and classes and those sort of things gets you out of the alone and away from the silence to help you make better choices. And then having that sense of community, accountability buddies, everybody, I wouldn't say everybody, but most of the people in these communities have that same goal that they want to build a better life for themselves. And so if they're talking to people and they care about each other and they have that sense of community, then they can call each other out on it. We had a similar situation the other day where we had an individual, she's been clean for a really long time, but she had a hip surgery and she's been in a lot of pain and she's been clean, so she can't have the sort of pain medication that,
Mhm.
a normal person who's been discharged from that surgery would just automatically get. And so she's really struggled with making sure that she doesn't relapse in her recovery for her hip and also for her addiction. And the fact that the community has come around and supported her has helped her. She's a month and a half post recovery now, and she's still clean, but she struggles every day. And yesterday she came out into the courtyard and she just screamed really loud, and like four residents came to her, and she was like, "I just need somebody to tell me not to do it because I want to do it. I want to use, and I just want to stop hurting." And everybody, talked to her. They sat out there for hours. They were out there talking to her, and one of the gals sat down on the ground and was massaging her foot, and like they were talking to her and brought her a soda and like just kind of helped her work through it. And without a sense of community, she would have just sat in her apartment and she would have relapsed. That would have been her choice,
Yeah.
and the fact that not only did she feel like she could go out there and just scream and know that somebody would show up, but for everybody to really just show up and not just be like, oh, she's screaming, shut up. They came out and they're like, what's going on? How can we
Mhm.
help you? Somebody being so selfless to sit down on the ground and massage her feet, like that's incredible. And that's the power of a sense of community. That's
Yeah.
everything.
I think that people have this misconception of recovery in addiction, like, "Oh, once you're clean, you're cured." And it's like, no, it's an ongoing everyday for the rest of your life battle, and life happens, like, that individual needed surgery, and the
Mhm.
recovering process was a lot of pain, and they can't take those painkillers. And I know that there are some people that I've talked to that are have been in recovery for a really long time, and they're like, if it's doctor prescribed and it's okay and you take it the way you're supposed to. I've had some people say, okay, but that is like only if I have to, like I can't bear it. But there are some individuals that have been in recovery for a long time that are like the person you're talking about, and they're like, no, I can't, because if I take them, I'm gonna full on relapse, and
I'm
or
like, there
they
you go.
they look at it as a relapse even if it's doctor prescribed and they're taking it the way there's it's just, I think, the point of view and the person that is in that situation. But I think people, circling back, is that there's this misconception that they think like once you're clean for a certain amount of time, it's like it just goes away. And it's like it's not, though, because it's an ongoing battle that you have to deal with forever. And I feel like
Absolutely.
people don't understand that.
And there's a deeper level to that too, in that, the reason why they started using in the first place, right? If they didn't address that trauma, triggers hop out of nowhere, for everybody. I'm sure everybody listening to this podcast has something that was traumatic in their life that sometimes they're just vibing it, just driving down the road, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, boom, you know, I just thought about it and it just popped in my head, and now I have all these feelings and all these emotions, and I'm like, I didn't want to think about that. Go away.
Right.
That's trauma. It's uncontrollable and it comes out of nowhere. Or you smell something that triggers you and reminds you of that moment or whatever. And so at the core of it, maybe they've gotten clean, maybe they've gotten away from the substance, you know, but they haven't addressed the trauma, which, makes it really hard and they may feel triggered. And in that moment, the fight or flight in our bodies says, let's make it feel better. Let's make it feel better. And what was the thing that made it feel better? I got high. I got high. That's what made it feel better in the past. And I need this to go away. And so, you know, they have to be like, okay, no, I got to dig in my toolbox and remember all of the healthy coping mechanisms that Thrive taught me. And I'm going to go for a walk right now. And I'm not going to be alone because right now I need people to talk to me so that I'm not in my own head. And so I'm going to call my friend and talk to her for a little while. I'm going to go put on a happy movie that reminds me of a good time and, dig into those healthy coping mechanisms. But without the those different tools, you know, trauma is a forever thing and it's an uncontrollable, unpredictable, wild thing. And so they will always struggle with the possibility that they may relapse and it could come out of nowhere.
Yeah. So I know that I mentioned one misconception about recovery, but what are some of the misconceptions you've come across about homelessness and recovery? in like the time that you've been working with these individuals?
So a lot of people believe that they're homeless because, their choice, that they're just druggies and, that they're homeless because that's what they chose. And um, what I like to remind people is that in the world that we live in now, everybody is one bad incident away from homelessness. You know, I don't know very many people that have a fat savings account in the world that we live in now that could survive. They live paycheck to paycheck. And
Mhm.
so all it
Especially
takes
in
is,
California.
yeah, exactly, exactly. All it takes is falling ill, and your transmission blowing, and you know,
Not being able to
uh,
pay your rent,
exactly, it's a perfect storm. And
losing your
you
job.
can't. Exactly. There was a downsize. And one small tragedy is all it takes for you to miss a paycheck or two or three or four, and then you can't pay your rent, and then you're evicted and you're homeless. And then now, like I said, who wants to be stone cold sober on the side of the highway? You know, like
Yeah.
you have to remember that these individuals didn't just like, oh, they're just terrible people and they just are homeless. Like they have a story and reasons why they got to where they are, and uh, it could happen to anybody. It could happen to you. It could happen to your brother. It could happen to your sister. It could happen to your mom. It could
Can
happen
really
to
happen to anybody.
anybody. You're not exempt from this crisis that we see every day when we're driving down the street and we see those homeless encampments. It could be you, and so the misconception is that you these people are choosing to live like this, right? Um, and let's see, another misconception. Hmm, I don't know.
No, you're good. Yeah. I totally get what you mean. I have this friend that such a bad he was like, "Oh, I'm an alcoholic." And I was like, "Yeah, you are." Like,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And I'd be like, "You need to stop." I would be telling them like, "You need to stop." And that's not something that just happens. That like is something that like progresses. So it was like I didn't see it coming, but like I saw it more like, "Oh, he could have a problem," as like time went on. And I was actually on the phone with him on my way here, and I told him, I was like, "You need to stop hanging out with these people that, are bad influences." And I'd be like,
Yeah,
"Hey, did you go to a meeting?" And, like, it's also just like, it's so one, like, one thing that happens, and it's like, our one of our really, really good friends passed away 7 years ago, and I think that's when it kinda started a little bit,
mhm,
and we talk about him a lot. And he has motivation. He wants to be sober. He's like, I'm like, but I also was finding myself getting upset because I'd be like, I'm telling you what you need to do and you're not doing it. But
mhm,
he's to the point where he's like, no, I need to, and all that. But it's also just like what you mentioned earlier, you can't want it more than they do. And
mhm.
also, he's been watching my podcast and he's like, when I'm sober, he is like, I'm gonna be on your podcast. And I was like, "Hell yeah, dude." So it's like it's really just one life event. It could be like losing a really close person, it could be losing your job, it could be taking those painkillers that you're prescribed from a surgery you had, and you really
They're
like them.
addicting.
Yeah, you really like them. And if you have that addictive personality, if you have a parent or 2 with addiction or, that runs in family,
Mhm.
it could be anything, really. Just takes one time.
Absolutely. And drugs are really addicting. People, that's a good common misconception. If they wanted to stop, they could. Like it's just that simple. Just stop. Just be better. Just do better. Like that's not
It's
how
so
it
much
works
easier said than done.
for sure. And it's a deeper level. First of all, like we talked about, the trauma and why they started using it in the first place. Did we address
Mhm.
those things? and then just the chemicals of it alone,
Yeah.
we have these individuals that come to permit supportive housing, and we have to get them into a facility to detox because it's not safe for them to detox. They can just stop.
You
Like
can die.
people die from that. Yeah, it's very serious. We don't do that because it the chemical piece of drugs is so complicated, and going through withdrawal isn't just like, oh, you just really want it. Like there is
No,
physical
it
ailments
feels
with
like
it.
shit.
It's
From what
awful.
I don't know, but from what I've seen and what people have described, it's awful. It's like having the flu on steroids.
Yeah, I mean, like, such a small scale, but I know that a lot of people that, like, haven't struggled with substance abuse can understand this because I guarantee you everybody's gone through this. They quit sugar or something or caffeine, right? You all have to
Yeah.
have your coffee. I've been clean off Red Bull since December 4th. Who's counting? Not me. But but when I stopped drinking Red Bull, it was no joke. I had headaches, I had sweat, I had the worst migraines in the world. My body physically hurt and I craved it and I still crave it. I still don't go into a gas station because they're everywhere and I want one. Right. And so, like, on something as small level as like quitting caffeine, like, imagine, that times a million. Your body just, it hurts and you get physically sick and your body doesn't know how to deal with that. And so a lot of people who try to get clean die because of the withdrawal. So it's no joke. They can't just stop. It's not going to just be like, oh, well,
It's not
don't do that
easy.
anymore. It's not.
It's
And
not
it's
like
a and
shame
it's a
shame.
daily
It's like
commitment. Right, exactly. It's a daily commitment. I wake up every day and I go, okay, I'm driving to work and I'm really tired and I would really like a Red Bull right now. But no, I committed and I promised myself I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. And instead, I'm going to dig into my toolbox of healthy coping skills, right? And I'm going to avoid triggers. I know it is a trigger for me to go into a gas station. So I'm not going to do it. I'm going to dig into my healthy coping mechanisms and I'm going to turn on some music and listen to some music. And I take my water bottle everywhere I go because I can't be like, oh, well, I'm really thirsty. I'm going to stop and go get a drink somewhere. And then there's a Red Bull. I make sure that I have something to drink all the time,
yeah. Get a
you
cool
know?
water bottle, that'll help too. Like, if you get, like, a really pretty water bottle and you put stickers on it,
I,
I have a really cool one at work to encourage
I
me to
love
drink
my
more
water bottle.
water. Yeah,
Uh,
I love
you
your
know,
healthy it's beautiful. I love
yeah,
your
like
healthy coping mechanisms. I just sit in my car and yell "fuck" really loud, and then that makes
that,
me feel way
that is
better.
also a healthy coping mechanism. I didn't talk about how I like to, so I like to rewrite songs.
Oh, yeah, I
Not
do
like
that too.
not write them down, but like I'll turn the music up really loud and I'll scream lyrics and it'll be something like, you know, Pink's like, so what? I'm still a rock star. I was like, so what? This stupid traffic sucks and I'm mad about, like I
Yeah.
can like really, I mean, it's not good and it should never, ever, ever go public.
Yeah, no,
People,
I do that, like, I'll be like
but
I'll be like, "Jingle bells," because Daniel will sit in my office. I had Daniel on a few episodes ago, and I was like, "Jingle bells, Daniel smells Angelica laid an egg. So and so is here, and he's really mad." And I'll just like start like doing like little jingles, and we'll laugh about it. And I'll be like, "Oh my god!"
that's a
But
healthy coping
it's
mechanism.
healthy. And then I'm like, we laugh
It's
about it, and I'm like, "All right, cool, let's go deal with it."
and I feel better, right? Screaming and throwing a tantrum for a second. I always, and I tell my kids this too, like, cool, cool, cool. We're all gonna have a huge tantrum. We're gonna say whatever we want for the next 5 minutes. We're gonna really just be super negative. We're gonna get it all out of our system, and we're gonna scream, and we're gonna throw stuff down on the ground, and we're gonna stomp, and all of those things. And then we're gonna talk about solutions and how we're gonna do better, right?
Yep.
So, but we got to get it out first,
Yeah,
and that's
definitely.
okay too. And we do that with the residents too. Like we're like, okay, I can tell that you're like super, super mega pissed. So right now you can say whatever you want. Nothing's off limits. Let's get it all out. And then let's go back to reality and make a plan. But for now, right now, 5 minutes, unapologetically yourself and all of your feelings, and that's healthy too.
Yeah, I can't do that because most of the time they're mad at me. So that they would
Yo,
just be like,
I I think that that's probably a good idea for a service coordinator
yes,
to, you
exactly. Because
know,
if I
get
let
one of
them have
your
free range, they'd be like, and I'd just be sitting there and I'd be like, so,
you're
but
like,
I don't take it personal. I'd just be like, okay, you're really mad at me. Maybe you should not be talking to me. Go talk to someone in the back. Like,
yeah, they can
definitely.
have free reign, tell them, if you don't have somebody to talk to, be like, okay, here, I'm going to leave you in here for a second and I'm going to walk away and you're going to say all the things that you want to say. And then I'll come back and then we can have a conversation that's acceptable.
Yeah, if it was like they were mad at like their caseworker or something, I'd be like, yeah, sure, let's talk about it. But like if they were mad at me, I'd be like, you can go do that free reign stuff with a caseworker because you might hurt my feelings for like a second.
I'm I'm not ready for that. And yeah,
I
you say
might
not
be a
take it
little
personal, but we're
insulted.
human.
Yeah,
We're
totally.
human.
I have feelings too.
Oh, for sure. I think I have pretty thick skin. I think that I'm pretty
Oh, me
patient,
too.
but I also know that I'm human and some things do actually really hurt my feelings.
Yeah.
And there's some people that, as much as, like I tell my team all the time, you know, you can't de-escalate everybody. You can't help everybody, period. And there's
Mm-mm.
absolutely no shame. And I expect that we all tap out when we need to tap out. We
Yeah.
have a resident on one of our properties that Angel cannot do it. It's not
Yeah.
never gonna happen.
Yep.
Just her existence frustrates me. And I know that about myself. I don't know what it is. It's probably a trauma deep down inside and she looks like somebody or talks like somebody. I don't know. There's just something. And I know that I am not the right person to de-escalate her because when she's escalated, she escalates me and it's just a whole thing. So if there's something that she needs, I know that I have to be um swallow my ego and my pride and be like, hey, Lily, tap in. You're going in there. You're going to handle that one because this is not a me thing.
Not
And there's
today.
no shame in that. Not today. This is
Nope.
not a today thing. And, the today thing, I may be perfect with that person all the time, but I woke up with a shitty attitude and I know that I'm just agitated today and it's not
Yeah.
going to be a productive day for me. I know that me as a person has to be able to check out and be like, all right, I'm doing paperwork today. I'm staying in my office because I'm not of any help to anybody today. And put yourself in timeout. And, I think that everybody has to make those choices and acknowledge that we're human.
Yeah, definitely. Um, what keeps you going when you have bad days?
So this is super corny, but um I have sticky notes and I write down the good things that happen, the small wins, the big wins, all of the wins. It could be something as simple as, one of my residents came up to me and just told me that they feel safe, right? So I will go into my office and I'll write on a sticky note, Sandy told me that today she feels safe, and I'll tuck it in my desk.
Oh my god, I kinda do the same thing, but I write it in my notes in my phone.
That's way more earth sensitive, earth cautious. I
Ugh.
like that. I'm a sticky note girl, and it's bad because I have so many of them, but I also like it because I find them sometimes randomly,
Aw.
and so I'm like, oh, I didn't know that I needed this, but I needed this, right? So I keep stock of the good and the beautiful moment for me,
Yeah.
um, and I keep it in front of my face all the time. Why did I do this? Why did I choose to do what I do and what my goal is. It's not as simple as, oh well now it's here, I have to remember the mission and the base purpose. If I don't do this, you know, then I know that these individuals I don't have control over anymore what support they have. And they may end up with, there are great service providers out there. I'm not saying all of them are um lack the ability to provide quality services. But I don't have any control over who is going to help these individuals if I don't keep going, right?
Right.
And so I remind myself every day that you show up, because if you don't, they don't have somebody to walk them through the struggles that they're walking through, right? And just remembering that even the small differences make a difference. It could be something as simple as I show up and I smile. A smile's contagious. And I ask somebody, how they're doing, and I use their first name. And they woke up in a pissy mood, but they saw me and we had that interaction, and the rest of the day they're positive again. And so just holding on to the good keeps me going.
Yeah, knowing their name actually goes a really long way too. I remember I know everybody's name and I know everybody's unit number off the top of my head. And I had somebody, like a third party vendor, come out and fix something, and I said hi to a resident, and he was like, "Do you know everybody's name that lives here?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he was like, "Really?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he was like, "That's impressive." And I was like, "Really?" But it actually goes, or he was like, "Yeah." Like, he's like, "It probably means a lot." And I was like, "Yeah, it does." I was like, I just remember because that's just how I would like to be greeted. I didn't even think anything of it. But I remember you, going over that at a training, how important it is to, like, how it could change their mood, like, "Oh, like, I feel seen and I feel heard," kinda thing.
Absolutely. The name changes everything. And you are like the definition of the property manager. I would love to just like own and put on every property, because you have that acknowledgement of who, they're not just a unit number. They're a person and they have a backstory. You've got compassion and understanding, but know the value of making sure that there's consequences so that they can learn and grow and everything. But yeah, that name thing, it's such a beautiful, beautiful thing to have and to share. And um, gosh, you should make sure that every property manager that you ever work with, Angelica, takes that on from you, because it does. It changes everything.
Yeah, I feel like everybody's told me the clone thing before. They're like, "We could if we could just clone her and put them there and here, and the world would be better," or something, someone said that one time, and I was just like, "Well, unfortunately," I was like, "I'm here, and I'm only one person, but I will help you find the person you need."
Hmm.
So,
Which is
yeah,
why we teach, we
exactly.
educate people
Yeah,
and help them to understand that.
definitely. Yeah, well, you're really, doing really great work and you're changing people's lives. And I don't know if people tell you that enough or if anyone tells you thank you. I don't really get a thank you often from people because they just don't really, and I don't expect it either. I'm just saying that like, the work that you do, it does not go unappreciated. Like it's awesome what you
Yep,
guys do. I love seeing your Facebook posts. If you guys don't follow Thrive on Facebook or Instagram, you should. I'll drop the links, not the links, but like the ats and the names of the groups, and you guys can give it a follow and check it out. It's actually really amazing what Angel's doing at these facilities. So definitely check it out. If you have any questions, you guys have a website too now, right?
we sure do. www.thriveempowered.com. And so you can check that out if you have questions. My contact information's on there, as well as on our social media. And, I can share whatever deets you want
Yeah, and
about
Thrive's fairly
whatever.
new too, guys. So like, check it out. Maybe spread the word a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, we just
Yeah.
launched in October, and we are live on 8 sites right now. And July will be live on 11. We're super
Heck
super
yeah.
excited and changing the world one community at a time.
Yeah, that's awesome. Is there anything you wanna say or add to anything about Thrive or people that are possibly dealing with homelessness or maybe wanna be a little bit educated on just the topic of recovery and homelessness?
Just to remember to greet everybody with a compassion and and understanding, and remember that everybody has a backstory and a why for where they are, and you you don't know. So take the time and see them as a human and ask them their story, ask them what hobbies they have that they can teach you, and just greet everybody with that same compassion because it could be you. And if you're struggling with substance abuse and you are trying to get clean, remember that relapse is part of recovery and you can do it and you're not alone. And if you want support and somebody to talk to, you know, we're here, we're happy to help. And there's lots of people that are, and you're worth it. So keep doing what you're doing and remember that you are worth all of the effort that you're putting into yourself.
Yeah, well, thank you for coming on to my podcast and talking about this. This is awesome.
Thanks for having me.
Of
And thanks for
course.
all that you do.
Oh, thanks. Sounds good. All right. Well, guys, I'll see you next time. Thank you so much for joining us today. And once again, this is Angel Sivori, the director and founder of Thrive.